Roger. Red is hot, and then touch it again.
Check one. Hello, Redstone. Can you hear me? Redstone, can you hear me? Doing a little check for you. Redstone check. Redstone check. Checking again.
So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Panel number 2, cyber electromagnetic activity support the core and below. One of the things that we are very, very proud of at Army Cyber is the fact that we did take a very, very strong look and see how do we provide support at all levels, strategic, operational, and tactical. What this panel is going to talk about today and highlight is the work that we've done tactically. And so, as we start to move forward, I think a number of lessons learned across the spectrum will be interesting to hear today, and certainly the engagement afterwards as well. So, Dick, over to you.
Sir, thanks for that setup. Good afternoon, everybody, or good morning, I should say. We are off to a great start, good first panel, and as General Nakasone just said, this panel was uniquely introduced by General Thomas's comments and many of the things that he talked about. So let me add our thanks to AUSA for hosting this event and for all that you do for soldiers and families and our Army every day. As you already heard, we know cyber is a critical capability that's in high demand strategically, operationally, and tactically. This panel has been assembled to get after that tactical demand and the employment of cyber electromagnetic activities in support of operations at the core and below. AUSA and our cyber have assembled a very strong panel. Now, I'm quick to point out that this particular panel is a little bit more junior than some of the ones you typically see at an AUSA Hot Topic. But this panel's experienced in the subject. It's balanced across compos, and it has both tactical commanders and cyber practitioners. In fact, what struck me about the panel as we were getting ready, and as I learned about these cyber experts, is how readily we've integrated the cyber branch into the Army. When I talk to these soldiers, they speak of their experience in the field, their branch qualifying positions, and their progression of cyber assignments with the ease of an infantry officer or a field or air defense artilleryman. The panel is balanced with a BCT commander who's charged with employing these effects at the tactical level, and a retired general officer who supports cyber in the Army from industry today. So let me introduce the panel quickly so I can turn it over to the panel chair and to the panel members. Our panel chair is Colonel Promotable Joe Hartmann. He currently serves as the Deputy Commander at Joint Force Headquarters Cyber and has lots of experience in this business in his Army and Joint career. Second will be Major General retired Greg Potter. He's the corporate lead executive for Northrop Grumman at Fort Meade and Aberdeen, Maryland. His prior military experience, however, includes, among others, J2 at various commands, ISAF, UCOM, JSOC. His final assignment as the Director of Signals Intelligence for the National Security Agency. Then Major Promotable Wayne Sanders, who's currently serving as the Branch Chief for CEMA support to Corps and below at our Cyber G39. He'll be followed by Major Steve Fye, 152nd Cyber Protection Team Lead, Cyber Protection Brigade. Then Colonel Robert Ryan, who's the commander of the 3rd Brigade Combat Team, 25th Infantry Division. And then finally, Colonel Adam Volant, the commander of the 91st Cyber Brigade and the commander of Task Force Echo in the U.S. Army National Guard. So, a strong panel brings the right experience. I'm going to turn it over to the panel chair, who's going to set the conditions and give us open comments.
Hey, sir, thanks for the introduction. I want to thank everybody for being here today, especially my fellow panel members. Hey, my name's Joe Hartmann. As discussed, I'm the Deputy Commander of the Army's Joint Force Headquarters at Fort Gordon, Georgia. So the Army has built a Joint Force Headquarters, 129 personnel resourced down in Fort Gordon at the home of our future headquarters, co-located with the Cyber Center of Excellence, providing support to CENTCOM, AFRICOM, and NORTHCOM. I would invite you from a green suitor standpoint, in particular, if you get down to Fort Gordon, come see us, and we'll take you and show you what we're doing. We're here today to talk to you about CEMA support to Corps and below. It's a pilot program that we've been executing for the last 3+ years with a host of Army partners across the Army. I'll highlight some of those in my discussion, and then hopefully we'll talk about some more of them during the question and answer period. You know, I want to highlight that this was started as a tactical cyber pilot, and then a cyber support to Corps and below, and then a CEMA support to Corps and below pilot. But I just want to highlight up front that fundamentally this is about making the Army more lethal, both to support current operations and to support future operations. It's about improving our training environment so they replicate near-peer threats in cyberspace and the electromagnetic spectrum. And it's about leader development, and so that we train leaders across our Army to employ the existing and future cyberspace operations, electronic warfare, and information operations force and capabilities. A little bit about my background. I was privileged to serve as the 780th MI Brigade Commander when the Army Cyber CG asked if I could send 4 people to the National Training Center. Because I wasn't really all that educated at the time, I said, sure. All right, and little did I know that in order to send 4 people to deliver offensive cyber effects at a combat training center, I was actually signing my brigade up for about 40 people. All right, that would have to build an internet infrastructure, that would have to build the scenario, that would have to act as observer controllers and do a whole host of things that were really required to execute the world-class training that we do at a combat training center. Initially, we called this the tactical cyber pilot. It then became the cyber support, and now CEMA support to Corps and below pilot. After I left command of the 780th, I was fortunate to be the G3 operations officer for U.S. Army Cyber Command. I was lucky because that allowed me to continue to be involved in this pilot program and really continue to work this as we expanded from kind of niche capabilities at the training center to expanding this to the ability to execute remote operations and to really include all aspects of cyber, to include DODN operations, defensive cyberspace operations, offensive cyberspace operations, electronic warfare, and information operations. It's really neat that Colonel Rob Ryan is here today from the 3rd Brigade 25th Infantry Division, because the first rotation we ever did was with 3rd Brigade 25th Infantry Division at Fort Polk, Louisiana in 2015. As briefly mentioned, we were really focused at that point on providing an offensive cyber capability that a brigade commander could integrate to support full spectrum ops. While that initial rotation was successful, we identified a lot of shortfalls that we've really spent a number of years trying to remedy. Really, the first shortfall I'll just tell you is that it was a lot harder to do this in the operational environment than it was to design a PowerPoint slide that told people how we were going to do this. Okay, and there's a really relevant point in there, and so you have to be able to do this in the middle of a monsoon in Fort Polk, Louisiana, or any other operational area. I think in the last CTC rotation, at one point, it was 118 degrees and the wind was blowing 70 miles an hour. Okay? So you have to be able to do this when it's 118 degrees and the wind's blowing 70 miles an hour. And we learned that in spades during the first rotation. The second kind of major lesson learned, and I learned this lesson in a 60-minute counseling session on the hood of a Humvee with Major General Flynn, the 25th Infantry Division commander. I think he said something like, "Hey, Joe, you guys are doing great stuff, but I don't understand anything about the dolphin speak that they're talking to us in." Okay, and his message was, hey, cyber guy, you know, if you want to integrate cyber capabilities in the maneuver force, you have to be able to talk to the maneuver force in the language that they're familiar with. But really the point was you have to be able to integrate this into their operational process. There's not a cyber process and then an operational process. There is an operational process, and to be meaningful, you cyber guys have to be integrated into that. We identified a lot of equipment shortfalls during that first rotation. Okay, and so the majority of the kit that we had when we started this was kit that was built to sit on FOBs, right? And it was built to sit on FOBs because that's the way we fought the last war. Not because anybody did anything wrong, but that was just the Army that we were in. And so I think the first rotation we deployed, you needed an LMTV and a trailer to move the offensive cyber kit for 4 soldiers. Okay, show up to a light infantry division and tell them, hey, I got you a couple of cyber guys, and oh, by the way, I need you to move their LMTVs worth of kit, and that doesn't go over well. And so that led to a lot of kind of innovation on the equipment side, where we started using COTS equipment, where we started providing that equipment to some really smart cyber soldiers and DA civilians who were honestly able to take a piece of kit that was intended to survey the wireless environment, and the kit the system had produced, you know, worked at a range of about 1 kilometer, where you use a COTS solution, you put it in the hands of a really smart cyber soldier, and they're able to, in many cases, quadruple that capability while significantly reducing the size so it is man portable with something like a light infantry division. And so again, a lot of really good lessons learned there. You know, we learned a lot about access platform capabilities and authorities. Those things are important at the tactical level just like they are at the strategic level. Okay? Those things don't all have to exist at the tactical level, but they have to be responsive at the timing and tempo of in this case, BCT commander operating at the National Training Center, the Joint Readiness Training, or the National Training Center. And so our ability to link a tactical cyber force from an authority standpoint, from a capability standpoint, from an access standpoint, back to the larger both intelligence and cyber enterprise is really, really important. We relearned the importance of intelligence support at the BCT level and reach back. All right? Many of you in this room, you spent a lot of time in places like Iraq and Afghanistan, and we fundamentally understood how important it was to have that SIGINT team that was linked back to the cryptologic platform, okay, or to have that intel team that was linked back to NGIC or INSCOM or the larger intel community. I'll tell you, for a time, we tended to sort of forget some of those lessons learned as we got back to the more traditional warfighting that we need to do in order to deal with kind of near-peer competitors. But in order to effectively operate, those linkages remain really critical. And over the next couple of years, we were able to partner with the 201st MI Brigade at Fort Lewis, the 513th, the Intelligence and Security Command, and a number of other agencies across the intel force that were really able to provide us significant reach back. Reach back is really, really important for a BCT, either in combat or somewhere like at a training center. If you've been at a talk at about 2 o'clock in the morning, you know, they are literally smoked. Okay, they've been going 19 or 20 hours for 6 or 7 days, and the ability to have that reach back to really produce the analysis and the intelligence to drive operations as the next op cycle starts is really, really important. And then finally, you know, there was a lack of knowledge both from a cyber standpoint in how to integrate with the operational force, and then in many ways there was a lack of knowledge in the operational force that this initiative has helped. You know, there's been a common narrative that this would overwhelm BCT commanders. I'll tell you, nothing's further from the truth than what I've learned. Our BCT commanders are all extraordinarily talented, and their ability to integrate cyber to help them accomplish their mission has been truly remarkable to me. We've executed 8 rotations at NTC, JRTC, NIE as part of this pilot. Additionally, every rotation at a training center has the world-class cyber op 4 from First IO, and then reach back trip support from our NETCOM soldiers. We supported units to include light infantry, airborne, armor, and Stryker brigade combat teams. Each is different, and again, for each of those organizations, we have to figure out how we integrate into their process. We've had soldiers do everything from, move forward in an attack with a Stryker brigade to move forward in an attack with a armored company. We have gone from really offensive cyber focus to the inclusion of offensive and defensive cyber, electronic warfare, and information operations. And when you hear Army Cyber talk about where we're going, it's the integration of cyber, both offensive and defensive, electronic warfare, and information operations to enable maneuver commanders to accomplish their mission. Capability development has been really important. Look, we're always going to be shooting behind the target if we are only able to produce cyber and electronic warfare capabilities using what is a fairly lengthy acquisition process. And so from an Army cyber standpoint, our ability to establish development environments, okay, and use COTS capabilities that can be modified for the specific requirements of a specific target is really the future for at least the tactical part of what we're doing here. We talked a little bit about remote operations on both the offensive and defensive side of the house is absolutely critical. All right, the ability to link the tactical force to the power of the intelligence community, the intelligence agencies, and all the capability that's resident in places back here in D.C. is critical. And if we don't do that, we're going to continue to only learn the solution once, and that's obviously not where we want to be. Yeah, I just want to highlight great support from FORSCOM, TRADOC, and units across our Army. When we first approached units to execute this pilot, there was obviously, and with good reason, a lot of apprehension that, hey, you cyber guys were going to come in and create a lot of requirements without putting a lot of skin in the game. I'll tell you, at the high end, I think we had upwards of 70 soldiers and DA civilians supporting individual rotations at the National Training Centers, but the partnership has been fantastic. Hey, we're not going to talk a lot about contingency operations today for obvious reasons, but I'll tell you that the other key piece of this tactical cyber pilot is lessons we learn at NTC. They're applicable to contingency operations. And our ability to integrate with a brigade commander in training, significantly improves our ability to integrate in combat. The lessons have also driven force structure initiatives in conjunction with the Cyber Center of Excellence, FORSCOM, and the Army staff. I just want to highlight, from my perspective, that again, we're in the cyber business and the electronic warfare business, and oftentimes we get thing-focused. Okay, we obviously need the technology in order to get after the mission, but the real thing that establishing a cyber branch and a cyber career management field and our partnerships has produced is really, really talented people. And the results we get when we link the really talented person with the technology has been truly amazing. Just want to recognize the panel members today. Major General Retired Potter, sir, thanks for being here. Obviously, he's got a ton of experience both on active duty and now retired, and we're really looking forward to hearing his thoughts. Rob Ryan is the commander of the 3rd Brigade, 25th Infantry Division. We have not been to a combat training center rotation with him, but we did recently support his brigade in a Lightning Forge exercise out in Hawaii. Rob has a ton of experience, both in the conventional Army and on the special operations side of the house. And again, the reason we're doing this, we're doing it for Rob. Okay, and so his perspective is absolutely critical to this discussion here. Colonel Adam Vallant is here from the 91st Cyber Brigade and Task Force Echo. Each of our rotations at a combat training center has had a reserve component. It's a total Army mission. Adam commands a unit called Task Force Echo. That's a mobilized reserve force that's supporting Army cyber right now. And I want to tell you that an absolute phenomenal partnership between Army cyber and the reserve component. Major Promotable Wayne Sanders is here today. He is the Army cyber lead for the CEMA support to Corps and Below pilot. He is really one of the experts in the Army, particularly on integrating offensive cyber capability at the Corps level and below. And so I would offer that you should ask him a number of questions. And then Steve Fye is here as well. Steve is really the Army's expert at integrating a defensive cyber capability at the Corps level and below. So again, I'm glad to be here. Sir, appreciate the invitation, and really looking forward to the panel members' open remarks and then discussions. Sir.
Okay, well, so General Formica told me he would kill me if I went over my time, so I'll try and keep it within the time. Dick, thanks for pulling this panel together, and thanks to AUSA for having all of us on this very, very important topic. What we're talking about today is enabling the warfighter with cyber, SIGINT, information, operations capabilities, so they can integrate those with their operations. And those capabilities, I'm here representing industry, and some of the things I'm going to say may sound self-serving, but they're actually not. The capabilities that are going to enable our Army to be the best they can be are going to come from industry. Industry has the time, industry has the money to invest, as you heard about on the last panel, to deliver those capabilities. And industry is not bound by policy. And so industry can be policy agnostic as we develop capabilities which then can drive policy in the future. And I think, as I reflected, I'm not that long out of retirement here. I just retired last year. And so I reflected on my transition from the Army to industry. And I think there needs to be a different relationship between the Army and industry. And quite frankly, the Army needs some wins in acquisition. And that it needs to be about a partnership. And that partnership is built on trust. You heard about that during the last panel. And there can't be this adversarial relationship or no relationship, even worse, between industry and the Army, and certainly the operational Army. Because while I've got great engineers that work for our company, those engineers come up with great solutions that they don't know how to implement. And it's only with the folks on my right and left here that can tell them, no, we really like that, but we don't like that, and make that knob do something different. It's also about what we're investing in. So if you look at where industry is spending their dollars and where the Army is spending their dollars on investment, how are those overlapping? How are those divergent? And where do we come together between industry and the government to maximize capabilities out there? We've got to understand, industry's got to understand operations. You only do that by having a robust dialogue between industry and the Army and certainly the operational Army. And so I would contend that we need to change how we interact on the Army side with industry. And as I reflected back on my time in the Army, not once did anybody ever say to me, hey, Greg, when's the last time you talked to industry? When's the last time you had a conversation with industry? When's the last time you talked to Paul Nakasone about his hard problems and what he's trying to solve? Where's the leader development within the Army that says, hey, industry is not a bad guy, and here's how you should engage them, but here's how you can engage them in a way that makes it good for industry and good for you, and nobody gets in trouble. And so I would contend if we're going to solve some of the acquisition challenges, certainly in this space, and the speed with which we need to operate in this space, there needs to be a different relationship between the Army and industry. Dick, I hope I made up some time.
You're good. Don't worry about it. You're good. I built in time for people who were going to go over. Go ahead, sir.
He keeps talking about me.
No, you're good. You're the chair.
Good afternoon. I'm Major Sanders. I'm the Chief of CEMA Support to Corps and Below for Army Cyber Command. Besides doing the integration of offensive cyberspace operations, I also have the best hair in Army Cyber Command. So we just normally go with that. Over the 8 CTC rotations that we've done, some of the big lessons learned that we've had outside of what Colonel Hartmann's already brought up Integrating into the ops process also includes operating and integrating into their products as well. If at the end state, as we mentioned, focusing on Colonel Ryan as the objective, if we're not involved in being able to put our stuff into an intelligence sync matrix, into a fire support execution matrix, if we're not putting those things into an op order where they know how to actually move cyber soldiers around the battlefield and plan for CEMA effects, whether or not it's offense, defense in depth, or whether it's using electronic support or electronic attack, or delivery of information operations across the battlefield. If we're not doing those things to where every staff element within a BCT or a division or a corps understands how to do that, then we're not meeting our objective. And that's one of the key pieces that we get after. Also for the training, the combat training centers, what we normally do also with the BCT commanders is we start 180 days out. We make sure that we understand what the BCT commanders' objectives are so that we can make sure that we better integrate into their processes. We don't come up as a dolphin speak or a purple unicorn and try and figure out how to actually be able to do that. We want to make sure that we understand what the objectives are. We just did this with 3-1 AD, and as Colonel Hartmann mentioned, the BCT commanders know what they're doing. Before we even got to the point of showing our brief, he already said, no, let me tell you exactly what I need, and laid it all out for us, and it was wonderful to see. It really showed the difference between where we've come over the past 2.5 years. Also being able to have the BCT commanders lay out for us, understanding what effects you want to achieve. Don't worry about the buttonology and the capability and all that. Tell me what it is you want to see the effect on the battlefield, and let some of the cyber and the CEMA experts be able to figure out what those things are. And if it doesn't exist yet, having a capability development force be able to meet that objective at the tactical level, at the timing and tempo required by the BCT commander. We also identify that there's a requirement for both expeditionary and remote capabilities. We want to be able to do certain things from Sanctuary. We want to do other things where we forward deploy personnel kit capabilities forward in support of the BCT. And whatever that right relationship is, that's a lot of what this pilot has been able to pull out. We want to make sure that we get after, as I mentioned, the products piece, but it's everything from recon, attack, and defend at the lexicon that the BCT commander also wants. So we're not coming in and talking about, well, I'm going to get to the layer 2 device and do these types of things and getting into any of that speak. It's, I am here to attack through cyberspace to create an effect in order to the task and purpose, just like a BCT commander would want. So we've been really successful at being able to do that and learning a lot of those lessons. And now the next piece is also being able to integrate into the combat training centers the replication of near-peer threat. No matter what commander is going to go out to those combat training centers, depending on where they go, we want to be able to replicate that environment, that cyberspace domain, and the electromagnetic spectrum that they're going to face. Because obviously the difference between CENTCOM, PACOM, EUCOM, they're very, very significant. So we're working right now in partnership with FORCECOM and with the combat training centers to be able to do just that. Thank you.
Before we go to the next one, some of my maneuver buddies will associate with this, but it took us a lifetime and a lot of painful NTC rotations for some of the other branches to learn to talk in terms that a maneuver commander could understand. It's so heartening to hear that cyber's already there in just a few years. So, and I know both Colonel Hartmann and Major Sanders both talked to it. So, okay, Steve Fye.
Good morning. As I mentioned, I'm the DCO expert. I'm Major Steve Fye. I'm the team lead for 152 CPT. Tactical cyber defense has the unique challenge of cheering for nothing to happen. Our goal is to provide commanders with planning and execution concepts and checks that do not compromise the integrity of the network and treat lapses in cyber defense with similar importance to lapses in physical security. Example, during a CTC rotation, Cyber Op 4 stole a BCT's op board prior to their line of departure. It was able to give it to the Op 4 ground commander. This was because of something simple, like weak passwords. This is the cyber equivalent of falling asleep on the perimeter guard. But how would the commander treat the cyber action versus the soldier asleep on duty? We need to provide commanders with the proper planning and analysis so they are aware of the critical cyber assets and information and can protect them accordingly and do that necessary planning so they make sure their priorities are in the right locations. Thank you.
Okay, good, thanks. Colonel Ryan.
All righty, thanks. Thanks for having me here, sir. Couple things. We're at a cyber conference. I'm from Hawaii, and it's about 8 degrees outside. So why couldn't I VTC in? Here's my first question, okay? So if you write that down, I'll go with that one to start. So my name's been brought up a couple times here by the panel. A couple things I'll throw out. How do I frame this? And I think that at the tactical level, the last fun job I'm told by many former 06s is, war is what? A struggle between confusion and control. And now I have a mechanism to leverage that. How do we best use that? And it's been interesting because I have a great sergeant major, and when these guys came down to visit me, my sergeant major walks in the office, and I go, "What are you doing?" And he's going, "I'm taking all the scissors out of your office." and I said, "Why?" He goes, "Because there's nerds coming." And I looked at him, I'm like, "Hey, sergeant major, I think we'll be okay." And the team came in, and we sat down, and I brought in my EW capabilities, and I brought in other people to kind of go, "Hey, how do we best leverage this capability?" And not from my soft Pacific background, but how on the modern battlefield do I get this ability to manage confusion and add to control? And it was interesting because the room got quiet, and I'm going, "Hey, I'm not sure how to do this." And we've got the CTCs to go train at, we've got some other things to train at, but how do we really do it? So our application for this was doctrinally, hey, mission command, you got to go back to mission command. Well, where is it in there? Well, it's a form of mission control. Is it or isn't it? And I wrestled with it as a commander, to be honest with you, and then leveraged Colonel Hartmann and the team here to kind of go, how can I best use you? And I looked at it this way: cyber is awesome. Cyber by itself isn't. And I think General Thomas brought that out. So EW. And I always look at things in a boxing perspective. If I'm just jabbing you, you're going to figure out my rhythm and you're going to counterpunch me. So how can I manage EW? How can I manage cyber? How can I manage IO? And if I can take those and make a cell, and not just a cell that sits on the side, that sits at the main table and not on the back wall of the tent, traditionally which happens with most of the enablers, and they have a key role in the brigade targeting and decisioning and information process, then I've created more control for myself and added confusion to my adversary. And there were things that we kind of messed around with. The other part is, how do I get acceptance with the staff? So you have a Brigade 3 and a Brigade XO, and hey, your 2's your primary, he's always going to be with you, sir, and your FSO is going to be attached to your hip pocket with your fist cord, and all of a sudden I'm walking around with a cyber guy. And everybody's kind of looking at me going, hey, sir, where's your fires guy? And I'm taking a cyber guy up on a helo tonight. And then I looked at some of the shortcomings we have as you go back to industry. So I was unable to use all the equipment that Colonel Hartmann has because some of it's not validated to be used on our aircraft. So a shortcoming there. My fix was, hey, I'm in Hawaii. There's 1 million rental helicopters. Let's go find one and let's figure this out. Or what else could I do to get you closer? Can I use the fixed wing? What else can I do different? And I think it goes back to the innovative process that we have within our leadership core as an Army. And it's probably stronger than it's ever been. A couple things that I'll give you up front, and I ask myself these questions. So as you out there formulate your questions, what is my BCT mission in regards to cyberspace? Is it a domain? Is it an area that I have to be aware of? And I think absolutely it is. Will it remain similar to the last 15 years, collecting computers, cell phones, and data forensics? No. I think there's defense, offense, but I also think there's this part where I've got to look at it from an EW standpoint. Can I turn somebody off using EW means and then collect somewhere else using cyber means and then get the intel and feed it back to division, corps, or higher? The authorities piece, everybody wants to wrestle with authorities. So in closed training environment, we kind of work the authorities piece so we can be a little bit innovative. How can I best leverage this to get to the end state? How do I lay this out? How do I take a bunch of young captains that grew up in this system and go, here's the problem. Give me a couple ways to get to a solution. And then go validate it. What's the risk? Training centers are meant to go fail. That's how we learn the most. So as you formulate your questions, I'll look forward to answering some of them. Thank you.
Excellent, thanks. And please, Colonel Vallant.
Good morning. My name is Adam Vallant. Thank you for the opportunity to be a part of this esteemed panel. My experience in cyberspace operation really stems from training in information operations. I had the opportunity to command for 3 years a legacy unit, the Virginia Data Processing Unit. Its name alone would show you really the journey that we've been on over the last 15, maybe 20 years. That unit was created in 1978 to provide tape backup and punch cards and mainframes and all the things that we see now in a museum. But I did command that unit at a time when they provided support overseas to contingency operations. We sent a small team to ARCERT-SWA. We have an enduring mission, as it turns out, to support United States Cyber Command as well, and then another enduring mission with the Army Web Risk Assessment Team. So that's kind of the framework that I had coming into this. More recently, I was part of a mobilization called Task Force ECHO that install, operate, and maintain critical infrastructure for United States Cyber Command. I talked about those other support elements that were provided. They were platoon-size elements generally. Task Force ECHO includes 7 states, 150 soldiers total, and it's the largest cyber mobilization in DoD history. A lot of complications there just in terms of time and space, but I would say the additive value of it was really the tension created by the fact that the Guard at that time did not have an approved cyber structure, but at the same time, the demand signal was really strong to employ those capabilities. So the mobilization weighed to our great favor. We drew in those talented folks and were able to train on top of that. That helped us create a more cohesive force that I think will have impact and readiness going forward. I'm the brigade commander as of about 2 weeks ago of the 91st Cyber Brigade. That's 985 people across 30 states with the National Guard. That has a structure of 5 battalions and a brigade headquarters. Those 5 battalions, 2 of them are in Virginia, headquartered currently out of Fairfax. But then South Carolina and Massachusetts both have a battalion headquarters, and then there's 1 unstationed battalion. It's interesting, the structure of the battalions. They have a cybersecurity and a cyber warfare company. The cybersecurity company, you could imagine, would perform assessments, forensics, critical infrastructure, and cyber support generally. But then the cyber warfare company provides cyber Op4, cyber ISR, and cyber operational prep of the environment. Each one of those entities then also provide mission command to 2 CPTs. The fact that it's spread out across the Guard is kind of new thinking, I think, certainly in the Guard lane, maybe not so much for the reserves, but we have a training, readiness, and oversight relationship with each of them. And as I said, the guidon was just unveiled in October, and I took command here a couple weeks ago. So it is emergent, but it's already employed, and I think that is a reason for goodness on a number of levels. There was some discussion before, so I'll touch it briefly. These forces are capable of providing their service, their talent, their expertise in both a Title 10 and a Title 32 capacity. So you could think of mission assurance in the homeland, or you could think of state active duty. And I would just offer for maybe another discussion, there are states that are already being very successful with that. You heard the mention of Washington, certainly a great example, but state of California, for example, using both their CPT as it was growing and other cyber elements within their state actually provide vulnerability assessments that certify and provide penetration testing that validate networks that include all the colleges in the state of California. So they do that at both a credential perspective and a huge cost savings for the state. Exercises like Cyber Shield and Cyber Guard are opportunities to rehearse, to train together, to begin this partnership, and frankly the trust element with industry, particularly with critical infrastructure. I was thinking of Cyber Guard, where a major power company that was in at least 3 different states was there with their civilian force as a part of that exercise, and I think it'll take a long, long dance with many, many songs before we get it right, but certainly we're at the table there. So Guard brings together a lot of talented people, but I think the best opportunity they have is for a purpose and for the people that they get to work with when they're mobilized. And so for that reason, among many others, I'm glad to be a part of it.
Okay, we've got about 30 minutes to field your questions, so please keep them coming. First ones have already arrived. Several of the panel members have already referred to the integration of cyber and EW CEMA training with the maneuver force, but this question came in, so we'll pose it to the panel and let them choose to elaborate on how they're training with this capability. Question was, how is EW being integrated into the CSCB? How many NTC rotations and other experiments or exercises have involved both cyber and EW personnel and equipment? So I'll send that out to the panel to talk to.
To address that, I would say pretty much all of them. One of the biggest things that we identified early on in the pilot was that EW has been really successful from a force protection perspective, a counter-IED focus in the counterinsurgency fight. However, as big armies looking towards more of the direct action training environment and being able to bring that up, we wanted to leverage as much as we could, and different capabilities being brought out there as fast as possible to be able to identify that. The EW side of the house, one of the key things that we've done, and we brought it out to Colonel Ryan's rotation, even at home station training for Lightning Forge, was capability and equipment that allows the commander to see himself in the electromagnetic spectrum, realize just how much he may be lit up like a Christmas tree in that electromagnetic spectrum, how you can actually do the signature reduction to reduce that, but also then being able to identify and see the adversary, and whether or not you can pinpoint signatures that identify what type of adversary you're seeing, what are those pieces of equipment, and then turn that around and plan for execution against those specific targets. So now you have trigger criteria for that. And then the cyber operations side of the house, same type of thing. Everything from the information environment within social media, and then also the importance of leveraging open source intelligence as well as a trigger point to say, if Colonel Ryan were to come up and say, I want you to tell me if there's any indication of violence against host nation forces or U.S. forces, and that becomes a trigger criteria to achieve a cyber effect. At that point in time, he has now dictated what his requirement is, and then whether or not we do it through EW or we do it through offensive cyber operations, we end up executing it that way. But each time we try and learn. We also partner with a lot of the development and the program managers and all that within EW and IO and cyber to continue to push the envelope on what that is, to get new kit out, to get new systems out, and then to, test those at the combat training centers as well.
Colonel Ryan, did you want to talk to that?
Yeah, I got a couple things on that. I think for us, we kind of look at it from a multiplicity standpoint, as he just mentioned. And one of the things you got to add in there is the SIGINT capability, too. Because it's not just the EW, it's not just the cyber piece, it's SIGINT, and it's formulating that picture for yourself. So the ability to leverage that and pull that together. And that's a lot of different entities being pulled together, and putting it under a young 03 to manage that can be difficult. But with a light leverage and a light understanding by the Brigade XO, and making the Brigade XO manage that, gave us some better throughput mechanisms and actually put them at the center table when we discussed our targeting.
Hey, sir, just a couple of things. So great comments by both. I would tell you that, there are a lot of other initiatives ongoing in the Army to get after, what is the proper EW force structure, what is the proper EW kit that's required at the BCT division corps level. How do we integrate, just like Colonel Ryan said, SIGINT and electronic warfare? And so what we have tried to do in a number of rotations is taken the equipment that is being sourced via other ongoing projects, and taken that equipment to a combat training center. So we're able to employ that equipment in a combat training center that's consistent with what other organizations are working in the Army, so we can learn lessons that help us kind of identify the larger way ahead. And so the Army has tried very hard to merge these various efforts, and so we're not learning lessons in this pilot that aren't applicable kind of across the force.
Hey, Dick, could I
Yeah,
say
go ahead,
something?
please. Anybody else
I
on
was
the
going to
panel?
say, so let me give you an industry perspective as we think about the problem, as try and solve some of these issues. One is multifunctionality. Okay, how can we take apertures and do multifunction things with those apertures? You can do EW, you can do SIGINT, you can do information operations with those apertures. Everything in the future, if it's not already, is going to be software defined. So how do we make sure that software defined, hardware enabled, and deliver capabilities that are swap, so size, weight, and power, so that you don't have three boxes for an EW capability, a SIGINT capability, and an IO capability. You have one box that you just trade out some cards, and you deliver three different capabilities. Or you put additional cards in there based on the technology or the threat. And so our guys, and now I'm not bound by policy, so I don't get into Title 50, Title 10 uses of that kit. But industry is thinking about, okay, how do I bring multifunctionality and reduce swap for those capabilities? The other thing we haven't talked about is, okay, we're talking about capabilities that enable our forces but it's also, okay, how do we deliver cyber resilient capability or capabilities for the kit that, the weapon systems that we use. And there's a lot of discussion across both the department and this industry in, okay, what are the things that need to go into acquisition of capabilities to make them secure for our forces so they're not attacked like we're trying to attack our adversary. I would tell you that that's not fully cooked yet because it is a difficult problem set, and it doesn't lend itself to a checklist, although some are trying to reduce it to a checklist. And so there's an ongoing dialogue between those of us in industry and the government is, okay, what is the best way to make sure that weapon systems are resilient? And the kind of the terms that we use or that we use in our company is start secure. So what are the chips? What are the code that's going into that? Stay secure. And that is, okay, what is the operational functionality of that particular thing? And if it gets attacked, what is the thing that can't fail in that weapon system to make sure that it continues to function? And if it is attacked, okay, it's got to work its way through that, and then it's got to what we call return secure. So start secure, stay secure, return secure.
Good, thanks. Next question, again, open for the panel. There's a lot of crosstalk and collaboration on CEMA between and among the U.S. military services. Is there similar collaboration occurring between and among allied armies, especially at the corps and below echelon? Anybody got any experiences with that?
So I'll take it. So, aside from some collaborative meetings and briefings at the corps level and below, we haven't done anything that would look like coalition operations yet. I think that the U.S., or at least from an Army standpoint, we're probably further along. There is good collaboration at higher levels, but not really on this pilot yet.
Rob, anything in the exercises that you do?
No, sir, nothing practical as far as execution. We do an exercise with the Singaporeans where we do talk this piece, and we build it into the CPX mode, though. So it's really in the CPX world. We haven't got into the practical world yet.
Okay, this next one, I'm not sure quite how specifically we'll be able to answer it, but it's a great question. Again, open to the panel. Can you comment on the realistic employment of cyberspace operations, specifically offensive tools, during Phase 0?
No would be the answer to that question. What I will say about Phase 0 is it's all about access. Okay, and so it's fundamentally more important to talk about access during Phase 0, because if you don't have access during Phase 0, then you're not delivering effects anyway. And so as we look at this pilot program, and as we look at what's the requirement in the Army moving forward, there is a significant requirement in Phase 0 for access, and that should be part of our strategy going forward.
The other thing is huge intelligence, to get that access. So doing that IPB, if you will, up front, a lot of work goes into that. And eventually, we're going to have to be able to, we don't want to talk about it, but we're going to have to be able to we'll these capabilities in all phases of operations, not just Phase 3.
This one's directed at Major Sanders, so we'll give you a run at it, and if anybody else wants to comment. So while the DoD maintains a solid perimeter network and endpoint protection, there still remains a major risk in protecting our most critical assets, unstructured data. What steps are being taken by our cyber and cybercom to ensure a least permissive model to all PII and sensitive content, and to actively alert in real time against insider threats and malicious intent? That was directed at you. I'm not necessarily sure it's aligned with you, maybe more Major 5, but whoever wants to go after that.
I'll start, and then I'll let the 40-pound brain next to me answer the rest of that question. But
you notice when he said 40-pound brain, he went to his right, not his left.
So one of the key pieces that we do try and identify is how overwhelmed a BCT, a division, or a corps the network is, the command relationship, all of that connectivity is, and we try and make sure that we've armed the BCTs and that tactical force with as much kit as possible so that we can automate a lot of those things. So being able to configure the enterprise security manager properly so that it actually has the alerts and warnings required, so that if you don't have the manpower to sit there and watch, you know, every ones and zeros that comes across your network, you're leveraging the power of the technology that's there to be able to do that. And so from that perspective, as long as that configuration is done, that creates part of it. And then the rest goes into some of the defense in depth and the hardening that Cyber Protection Brigade and other defensive experts would do. So I'm going to hand it over to Major Fly.
Good transition. Yeah, it really comes down to, like I said before, doing a good, solid planning and making sure that, you know, when you're talking about the broader DODIN, you're actually planning and integrating across the different echelons. So you have like the DISA level, the RCC, or the service provider level, and then down into the individual unit, and making sure that they're all doing in-depth planning from their own individual perspective. So they're looking at the problem set of protection and defense from a network perspective, from a host perspective, from a domain perspective, and making sure that the right allocations and defensive resources are put into those places. And then if there is a compromise in any one particular area, you're also sending information on up, so that if someone down at a specific unit got compromised, that means they had to work their way through the DISA level, through the RCC, and all the way down to that unit. How are they being notified? So that way it cannot go cross boundaries or cross networks. And so that's the real importance there in making sure that happens.
This next one, again, for the panel, but it really gets after an application of one of the challenges that General Potter threw out there with the relationship between industry and the Army. This question says, several speakers talked about the effectiveness of training in realistic scenarios like the CTCs. Is there a process for industry to observe these exercises so they can better understand the operational context and challenges, then go back and help create solutions?
Yeah, so sir, from our standpoint, I think we would obviously defer to FORCECOM and the CTCs on, you know, what's the exact way for industry to come out and kind of view those exercises. Wayne, I don't know if you have any. Yeah.
So I'd add, and I lived this before when I was in the service. You know, the AWE was down at Fort Bliss was designed to bring industry in and have that kind of dialogue. I don't think it ever matured to the fact that there was a good kind of relationship and dialogue between industry. And these are the kind of things that I think we need to look at is okay, how are we engaging with industry, and how are we bringing industry in to help solve the hard problems? Because one of the things that industry has the luxury of doing is time to think. One of the last panelists said, you know, industry's challenge is time. I would say that's a challenge and an opportunity because when I was on active duty, I didn't have time to think. Now, if somebody gives me a hard problem, I was worried about the day-to-day. If somebody gives me a hard problem now, okay, I've got the luxury to go back to my office, get the smart guys around the desk. Okay, let's try and solve this thing. But you've got to have an intimate understanding of how the Army operates, you know, like the other panel members talked about, in order to deliver a solution for that. So I don't know what the right answer is, but I think more transparency, more openness, the more we can bring, you know, there's no lawyers in the room probably, the more we can bring industry into the Army and what they're doing and observe what they're doing, not just at kind of pre-planned exercises. And you know, the folks here at this table are all at the operational level. Where I think industry needs to engage most is at the operational level, because that's where they're going to get that great input from the specialists and the sergeants down there who are doing the hard work and trying to figure this out.
The only thing I would add to that, you know, we have a great relationship with FORCECOM and being able to bring out new capabilities to them and experiment with them at the combat training centers. It's one of probably the good lessons learned that have come out of this. You know, you used to have to ask for whatever your package was as a brigade commander to go out to combat training centers like 6 months in advance. And FORCECOM's been really good at working with us to be able to do those types of things and say, hey, here's a new capability, we'd like to do that. But obviously, FORSCOM, as well as those tactical units, that's going to be where that requirement starts. It's going to be with those leaders that say, I have a requirement, and then we.
If I could just add one point there have been, and again, I highlight FORSCOM and the CTC because that's really the engagement point. But a couple of units that we've gone through rotations have brought kit that have been provided via industry in order to experiment, not necessarily as part of this cyber pilot, but certainly particular electronic warfare capabilities that were able to be exercised in conjunction with this, and then provide that feedback. And I'm just not exactly sure the mechanism to do that, but I think the engagement through FORSCOM is probably the right one.
I think this next question really is the follow-on to that discussion on training. It's how are the brigades informing requirements for material development, and how are we getting that into the acquisition system?
It's a great question. A lot of it is, even before we get to the CTCs, is going back to divisions utilizing the brigade force-on-force exercises. There where I think the division commanders had more freedom for his folks at division level to come in and look at the gaps and holes that exist, and then bring that back up through division to the MACOM. And in our case, it's First Corps, and then bring it back up to USERPAC, and then have that full cycle go. The obvious intrusion there is that that's a lot of layers of bureaucracy to get a decision that you need. So what we can best do at the brigade level is continue to hound it. One of the best things we've done in modernization is leverage what already exists capabilities. So PA Soldier has been a huge win for us down in 3rd Brigade, 25th Infantry Division, in modernizing some of our equipment. And as we continue to modernize, continue to echo what we need. The problem is that we ever gonna get ahead of that, or are we always gonna be batting in the bottom of the 9th with down by 2 runs in acquisition and fielding? And I can't answer that question.
Anybody else? Okay. How is, with our cyber capabilities, how are we looking at the exploitation of logistics, ammunition resupply, or casualty reporting to create a fog of warfare behind maneuver forces that degrades combat capabilities? I think that talked to the confusion that Colonel Ryan wanted to create before this happened.
Yes, sir. I mean, we're not going to be able to discuss specific capabilities. Obviously, we would like to create confusion among the adversary, across a range of systems, whether it be logistics or otherwise.
But, back to a point that General Thomas said, it's got to fit in with the operational plan. And so we're just like we don't do intel for intel's sake, we don't do cyber for cyber's sake. And the logistics guys may be the right target to attack. They may not be the right target to attack. And so it's got to fit into the operational plan.
Yeah, I think it goes back into the nested strategy. Is Corps doing this, divisions doing this, then the brigade may be doing EW only, and that synthesizes the effect of what cyber may be doing at the upper echelon. And I think once we can synthesize those effects, then we get the outcome that we desire, thus creating control for us and hopefully confusion to our adversary.
Okay, thanks. This next one comes in for Major Sanders, but I think others may want to talk about it. During the pilot, while supporting the BCTs, how often did you integrate and coordinate with information operations and PSYOP planners?
We did quite a bit, actually. One of the unique things that came out from a lessons learned perspective is the location of the FA-30, the IO officer that used to be at the brigade, then taken out of the brigade, left at the division level, and then brought back down. And as we look at Army Cyber as the all full spectrum from offensive, defensive, cyber operations, EW, and IO, is where does that best fit? How can we help answer an operational gap that's across the Army? And so sometimes divisions will actually get that IO planner down to the BCT, and that way we actually have a integrated IRC plan as the IO guy comes and brings in that capability. IO delivery through cyberspace is one of the key things that we've done very successfully at the combat training centers, within that information environment. And then recently we started looking into military deception, tactical deception, and into MISO. operations. Those are some of the key things that we've been looking at right now. And the key there, though, obviously, is at what echelon. How do you plan that? Colonel Ryan brought up, the integrating of effects across echelon. And each BCT commander brings a different way to look at it. No, I want to own this at my level. I want to do all of that. Or part of it's, okay, I want to focus on, a more tactical fight. Some of the themes and messages that comes out of the IO, I want that to be taken care of by a higher level. The key is making sure that we offer that capability and capacity. We want to make sure that it is part of the capability kit and effects that we can help the brigade commander fight through as part of that full spectrum CEMA. And if we can do that, then we're successful.
Yeah, I go back, General Thomas mentioned the ability to look at task organization, and as I said, especially with PSYOPs and how we leveraged it in our last exercise, was what does that cross-functional team look like? And then what do you want out of it? And how is it echoing what the upper echelon's doing? And a lot of times, it should be bottom up anyways. I should be feeding my division commander, hey, this is PSYOPs, this is what EW, this is what I can do for you. The one thing with EW that if you want to know what's a constant pain for me is the ability of off-the-shelf drones. Someone to look at me and me not affect it. So how can I best target that? Whether it's even through PSYOPs, even through IO, even through EW, even through deception, how can I get that team and that cross-functional thing to feed back to me to give division ideas? And I think I'm responsible for that for my CG.
Yeah, just to be clear, so an information operations officer has been part of the package that has generally partnered with the brigade during these various combat rotations. In some cases, that planner has been physically located in the TOC and performed the role really as kind of the lead planner and integrator. In other cases, the BCT has made the decision that IO specialist is best positioned in reach, where they have access to kind of a more consistent access to social media feeds, to integration with the intel reach element. We've honestly been successful using both of those. And so it really is ultimately up to the brigade and how that information officer best integrates with the brigade operations process.
This next one, I'm going to start with Colonel Vallant and then work our way, anybody else in the panel, perhaps Colonel Hartmann. What are the greatest challenges to keep your cyber EW workforce trained and proficient? And is the infrastructure available to you adequate, network ranges, et cetera?
So we're fortunate, I think, in the reserve component to draw in people that bring together academic experience, and they're really trained day by day in their work and how they pay the bills at the house. And then the extra piece of the heart that they give to us is what they do in the military side. So all those things are woven together. So in terms of training, I think there certainly is some responsibility there on the military side to get them trained and proficient. I mean, take, for example, the CPTs that are trained to a joint standard. All those schools are long and important. They're different than what we would see in corporate IT. Those challenges exist. I guess I'll go back to where I started with the mobilizations are a terrific opportunity to tie those people together, to get them woven together with the active component, frankly, a joint force. And that's been very, very helpful for us. It's definitely had an impact on readiness. In terms of the range piece, I think there's a lot of ways to approach that. I met last week with Paul Stanton at the CPB at Fort Gordon and talked actively about gunnery tables and the way that they're approaching this with simulations and whatnot. And I think we've got a lot of scale there. It's one of those situations that we see often enough where there's a lot of different interests in developing the perfect, and I'd say good is enough for today and tomorrow probably, so that we can start doing it rather than wait on that perfected range environment. We do have one, the Guard's got one that they're using, the DoD cyber range out of Quantico. But there's a lot of other ways to get at that. The best way to do it is just to be out there on active duty doing it, and so we're glad for that.
Hey, just a couple of things from my perspective. So a lot of really great progress the last couple of years from the Cyber Center of Excellence and their ability to train our soldiers to do the job that we need them to when they actually get to the unit. Previously that wasn't available, and so in my previous capacity as a 780th Commander, I would get a soldier, and then I would spend, in some cases, 18 months training that soldier to do what I did, which significantly affected our readiness. We, the Army, as the executive agent for cyber ranges, are building the capability that we need. Where we're not there yet is the capability to do things like combat training center rotations. And so to be perfectly honest, when we go to NTC, we build an internet environment. And at the end of that rotation, we take that internet environment down. That's extremely manpower intensive. It's and not the best way that we need to do things. So when Major Sanders talks, working with TRADOC and FORCECOM to build out the environments at our combat training centers that allow us to not only routinely execute these operations, but execute these operations based on the theater that a particular organization is going to, is really what we're trying to do in the future.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say just the challenge is that we spend a large amount of time training the individuals through the schoolhouse, through TRADOC and stuff like that, but when they get to the units, they also need to make sure it's a use it or lose it mentality. So when they get down there, they need to make sure that they're employed in the proper work role and really getting on their equipment and learning their environment, at least from a DCO perspective. And so providing them that ability to make sure that they're really able to get hands-on and continuing to hone that skill craft is so important for when they go out and to the CTCs and indoor combat rotations.
So I'm going to take it on a different path, and instead of just the cyber operators, I'm going to look at it from the CEMA planners that are actually at the BCT levels as we continue to build that out. One of the things we partnered with Cyber Center of Excellence on as well is being able to look at that and prioritize home station training environments as well. Like Colonel Hartmann said, when we went out to Lightning Forge, we had to actually build the internet environment and actually then replicate that, use that, and leverage our capabilities against what we built. But it was our stuff, so once we got done, we had to take that stuff back with us. But actually have something so that those brigade CEMA planners, those division CEMA planners, they have some level, but if you don't have an internet environment in order to be able to make sure that you know how to actually ask for and request for remote capabilities, or whether or not you're requesting forces to come and trying to deliver some type of expeditionary CEMA effect localized, they're waiting for those combat training center rotations in order to be able to get to that run and the crawl, walk, run phase, right? So we're working that right now to provide that for the rest of the Army as well.
The next one, I'm going to combine two questions and talk about how we train. I'll direct it to Colonel Ryan, but then open it up to any of the others for your perspectives. As with EW, units must fight when affected by cyber operations. What kind of measures does your unit take to mitigate or isolate the effects of threat offensive weapons on you? And then the follow-on question is really, how do you assess your ability to bring the effects and the integration of non-kinetic operations into your ground operations?
Both good questions. I think the first one is that I think the Army is going through this holistically is prepare for total war, not limited war. If you look kind of in the FOB mentality, we created TOC Mahals or large 06 level TOCs. So right now I went from 4 tents in a brigade headquarters to just down to about 3 GP mediums. So my signature, my EW signature is gotten less. The other thing is, as we add more stuff, that power draw, the ability to power myself is one of the things that gives myself away. That's the one problem I'm still wrestling with is power. And I say that because the more technology we add, 2 things you do to soldiers. You give them more stuff to do and more stuff to take care of, right? Okay. And the one thing that never changes is the time to do it in. So I'm always wrestling with that matter because everybody wants to bring something new and go, hey, let your soldiers do this. And I look on the LRC going, when? And then when you build that in, I kind of come back and go, I've got to figure this out. The part of planning and developing and understanding with that is how do I get, one of the things Adam and I just talked about is there a course even at PCC that gives incoming commanders the awareness of this? I mean, I'm aware of cyber. I'm aware of this because I came from the soft world. We were leveraging a lot when I was working for General Potter and General Keller and others that are in the room. And I go, how aware is a guy that's been conventional his whole career? How is an ABC young lieutenant colonel, how is he aware of what may be out there and for him to leverage right now? And how are we creating that awareness through our own education process? And I think that's something we could look at to do a little better.
Okay, thanks. Anyone else? All right. We've got time for one more question, then we're going to give you a chance to give final comments. Again, this one came in directed to Major Sanders, but anybody that's got thoughts on it, probably applies across the panel. CEMA support to Corps and below begs the question about resource management tools and training. What is our Cyber G39 doing to address the development of tools against adversary weapon systems that a BCT will encounter?
So we're tied and partnered with capability development across Army Cyber and U.S. Cyber Command. So, you know, the one team, one fight mentality with regards to that, while we continue to try and build the force structure to build more capability developers to get after that. You know, it's a very limited skill. I'm drawing a blank on the name. It's a very, very unique skill set that takes a long time to train somebody that has that ability to create those. So building the capacity across the force is very intensive. And then we look at, once we actually understand that, being able to educate the force on asking for the effect, not the capability, right? We don't want to give them a menu and say, well, I want this specific one, to find out that that's not what it's vulnerable against. But tell me that you want to deny or degrade their capability in X realm, telecommunication, internet communication, whatever it is, and then let us be able to push that piece. But we definitely are working that. We're also, you know, looking at the integration into the IGESTO community and all that to be able to bring that down as low as possible so that, you know, BCT commanders can actually leverage those capabilities as well. So that CEMA planner at that BCT level is expected to do an awful lot, and we are trying to do everything we can to arm them with everything they can, both from a training perspective and from a kit perspective, to be able to plan, synchronize, coordinate offensive, defensive cyber, IO, and EW.
Anybody else?
So, Dick, one of the big gaps right now, and this goes to kind of what Colonel Ryan was talking about, but it's to help the Colonel Ryans of the world, is what is their ability to see their own force and understand their own force as well as the enemy. So what tools do we have right now that allow the staff that work for him to integrate the capabilities that we're talking about, both EW, SIGINT, cyber, et cetera, out there? And those tools don't exist right now. And so we've got to give them tools not only to plan those implementation of those capabilities, but to be able to see themselves as well in the TOC so that they understand, okay, here's what my signature looks like. Here's what my network looks like. Where are the vulnerabilities? Okay, here's some guy mucking around in my network. And he doesn't have to wait for somebody at division or corps to tell him, hey, look, your BCT net's under attack. So that is a big gap right now. Not only do we have gaps on the capability side, but we have gaps on the planning and situational understanding side.
If I may jump in on that one too, sir, because you hit a great point. While Steve and I were actually out at NTC, sir, in that 118 degrees and 70-mile-an-hour winds, that rotation we actually built offensive and defensive cyberspace operations smart cards for the force. And part of what that actually was it included IPB with cyber considerations. It gets after almost like a cyber McCoo, if you will, from the S2 community, so that the S2 and the brigade and battalion commanders understand that it's just another overlay. It's an overlay that goes on side of IPB. It's not something separate. From a situational awareness, you know, we're working right now to figure out what the best solution is from a situational awareness, like that COP. What does that common operational picture look like so that BC commander can see it, whether it's on his JCR or what system he's actually seeing it on. But we want to be able to show and leverage those effects that we have line of sight capability for his EW assets, whether or not, as Colonel Hartmann mentioned, you know, access to specific things, whether or not we understand how much of that environment is fiber versus VSAT versus this. Arming that brigade commander and that staff with the ability to understand this is the environment in which I can operate, this is what I can currently affect, and if you want me to affect something that's outside of that, you need to be able to give it to me now so that I can develop a capability for you.
Yeah, correct. One of the things we took care in developing with those smart cards was to try to use the common language, the maneuver terms, you know, deny, degrade, deter, just to get after and make sure that we're not using that dolphin speak, as Colonel Hartmann mentioned, trying to speak either over somebody's head or sound like we're speaking down to them because we know more about, you know, specific technology. It's not about that. It's about bringing the capabilities to bear and making sure the commander is aware of what capabilities and assets he can use and leverage in support of his operations.
Okay, thank you all. You did a great job with your opening comments and fielding a multitude and a variety of questions. We're going to start down at the end with Colonel Vallant, give you a few seconds to give any closing thoughts that you'd like to share with this audience.
Well, it does seem clear that we're at a point of inflection, really, in the Army overall. This pilot's being discussed. It's clearly got a lean towards electronic warfare, which probably is no surprise. As we build that capability, from a reserves component standpoint, that'll require specified long training for a lot of talented people that will be added to the force. I guess one consideration that I certainly have in that is that the good fortune that we have in cyber is that we draw from talented people who work for business and they do cyber for a living. That population's larger, I think it's fair to say, as opposed to electronic warfare. So both a challenge and certainly an opportunity as we try to draw those people together to new formation and existing formations to make sure that they're, at the fight and ready.
I think we're at a point with cyber that I think the approach from the 06 level has got to be that we look at this and say techniques appropriate for managing resources may readily work on the battlefield. They may not work in training, they may not work here, but we're really in an opportunity to test some things out. And the Army's been labeled a little bit risk adverse. I think sometimes we are because of how we fought the last 15 years, but the ability to get out there and take the moral courage and challenge yourself to change a little bit. And if we can do that at that level, I think, and we protect those young 05s and those young company commanders that are getting after it for us, then I think we'll see this enhancement become more rapid. Thanks.
Closing comments are simple. It's like, don't be afraid of cyber. Like I said, the dolphin speak, it can be boiled down into maneuver terms. It's technical implementation that may be a little bit high level, but the actual concepts of what's needed to be can be boiled down into regular Army maneuver terms, and don't be afraid to assign those maneuver tasks to those appropriate personnel.
I think I've talked plenty. I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Yeah, I just kind of end where I started, that, both the technology and the threat are moving faster, and our acquisition system has to move faster. We can't be delivering yesterday's technologies today. And so that relationship between industry and Army and the government is critical, and so we need to work on that and how we do that better.
Hey, sir, just again to reinforce, one, I appreciate everybody being here today, but two, the cyber support to Corps and Below pilot, is not a standalone event. It's been integrated with where the Army's going from an MIEW concept, the MDTF initiative, what we're doing with the SFABs and other initiatives across the Army, and we look forward to working with everyone moving forward.
Okay, I want to thank Colonel Hartmann for the leadership that he brought to the panel and organizing the content, and to thank all the panel members for your thoughtfulness and for making the time to be here. Thanks again to AUSA. We'll close this panel with, I want to just touch on something that Colonel Hartmann said in his opening statements. All of the time when I do a panel, we spend a lot of time talking about technology, but it's good to be reminded that it's the soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and civilians that are going to develop, deploy, and operate this cyber technology that's truly our nation's most critical cyber assets, and it's for those soldiers that we do this. And again, thank you all for your attention, and thank you to the panel. Well done.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you, General Formica and Colonel Hartmann. Folks, after lunch, we're going to talk about initiatives on the future force in the cyber arena. We'll be back here at 13:30. If you need to find out where there are restaurants, there's plenty in the area. Check with the staff out at registration. 13:30. Good, Dick. Excellent. Excellent. Well done. You're approaching Chris